The Game Schooler podcast is a weekly audio show that educates new and experienced gamers about the awesomeness of tabletop gaming. In this week's episode, we'll cover expeditions around the world, our game of the week, discuss Bog Box Game Selection in the School of Gaming, and wrap it up by revealing our high 5 coolest dice and board game. Welcome to the Game Schooler podcast. I'm your host, Doug Kotecki, along with my co-host, Dr. Michael McCabe. How's it going, Michael?
What's happening, Doug? How are you?
I am fantastic. How about you?
Yeah, really good. I'm excited to be here. We have a lot to talk about, a lot to cover. I guess I'll just start there. I'm happy to be on episode 190 with you.
Yeah, it feels like a long time since we've talked because it has been a long time for us, not so much for our listeners. They get the episode every week, but It was almost 2 weeks ago that we talked to the good Dr. Reiner Knizia, and so we didn't have a regular Wednesday record like we usually do. So,
but it was worth
a lot of stuff in this show. Oh, it was 100% worth it. That's a great segue for follow-up. We interviewed Dr. Reiner Knizia last week,
and he was incredible, and I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Yes,
I mean, I really am. What else do you have to say about that?
It's just one of those things that if you would have told me, 5 years ago or when we started the podcast that something like that would even happen, it never would have crossed my mind.
Right.
And it's those things that are kind of the little rewards. You and I have talked quite a bit about, off air on the idea of, what's our purpose? What are we trying to do? And we're not chasing financial gain. We're enjoying what we're doing and spreading our love for the hobby and the fact that we do get some of those cool experiences out of it, whether it's Gen Con or that interview. It keeps it rewarding for us, and hopefully that joy and enthusiasm comes across to our listeners.
Yeah, and our show's different. We're like you said, we have come to a point where we realize or accept that we're not going to monetize the show. We want to be a safe landing spot for new and experienced gamers. And we don't do, I love so many different shows out there. I'll just leave it at that. Our show's a little bit different that way. I'd been spreading the interview to different places, and on one, Reiner Knizia Enthusiast Discord, which is an awesome little Discord that I've been a part of and been lurking for a while. I dropped it on there. We got 6 really nice comments, and then a content creator who has a huge following posts a video where he ranked all 100 Reiner Knizia games that he played this year.
So he's played an eighth of his games.
Exactly, in 1 year. He had 39 comments like within a day of posting it. And it just got me to reflect on, that is a part of the hobby where people want to list and order and banter. And I think that's an awesome part of the hobby, but there's a whole different place too to just talk about games and celebrate what's awesome with playing board games and connecting as a family and engaging and skill development. So, Yeah,
and the response was different, right? I mean, some of the feedback that we got was just the idea of different questions and responses that they hadn't heard before. And I think that was kind of cool and nice to hear on our end of it just wasn't the standard answers, questions, and interviews that maybe they've come accustomed to. So that was really cool as well.
Well, and if there's anyone else you want to have on our show, dear listeners, just reach out directly to them and tell them to come on the show, because that's how that was set up, which is just awesome. And you can get on our Discord to find out all about that. And Doug will go over that in just a minute, our housekeeping section.
Yeah.
Anything else to follow up on?
Nope, just the idea. I finished painting the Marvel United Spider-Geddon expansion. So if you want to see pictures of that, go check that out in the Discord. I posted some pictures there. Don't tend to post a lot of pictures, but I thought, hey, I'm going to do that. So I did it.
Nice.
And, that's all I've got for follow-up. How about you?
Yeah, I dove back into some Knizia this past week, if you can believe that. We played some Meow at home, and I plan on bringing that over to a game schooler review night here in the next few Wednesdays. Just a nice little trick taker. When I heard that you hadn't actually played it yet, I thought, oh man, I'm not a very good friend. Forget a fellow co-host. I really need to play that game with Doug, and got Millefiori to the table. And I think with the expansion, and just, I think coercion isn't the right word. But what is it called when you guilt your family into playing a game with you that might be slightly heavier or slightly longer? No, because I'm not threatening to take anything, and I'm not using guilt or
your love.
Yeah,
I won't love you anymore if.
So it's all set up and ready to go. Might be a few days away. I won't use that line. Maybe that works for you, but. Might be my 8-year-old, might be my 15-year-old. Maybe my wife will want to sit down and play little Millefiori with the Masterpiece expansion.
Yeah.
But no, that's the only thing to follow up on. It's after that interview, I was really enthused and on a Dr. Knizia kick.
Yeah. Well, that leads into my what's awesome in gaming, because I had a hard time thinking about what I wanted to put in this segment or what was awesome with gaming this week. And the thing I came up with was the joy of gaming. And we often take this hobby way too seriously. And I love hearing
the proverbial we, or you and me, or who's the we?
Everyone. People in the hobby take it too seriously. And I love hearing about the awesome experiences people have with games, whether they're big experiences or little minute experiences, and the idea of stories of kids overcoming obstacles, whether that's from a learning disability or just something clicking for them, or you hear stories of kids it's like I just couldn't connect with them or reach them, and I found this dinosaur game and it just worked. And hearing about people spending time with as a family. And it reminds me of hearing Dr. Knizia talking about growing up and trying to get people to play games. And my family growing up was not a board game family. We did not play board games frequently. We had some. A lot of them were missing pieces, and I've never played a full version of them. However, my parents did do something that was really cool that I thought, which was back in the day, you used to get surprises and toys in cereal boxes, which is not something as common as it is now, or it's not common now as it was then. You'd get wacky wall walkers and pens and little figures and collections, all these little
baseball
things.
Cards occasionally.
Yes, yeah. Post was solid for that. My parents. I had two brothers, and rather than giving those out when we got them, my parents would collect them and save them up over time. And then we would play a bingo one night after we had amassed a bunch of them, and those were the prizes for playing bingo. And here I am, 30 years later, and it's still a strong memory for me of something that I have growing up. And I think if I went next door and told my parents right now that was a memory for me and I thought that was cool, it probably would be insignificant to them, and they may not even remember doing it, but it was something big for me. And I think that's the awesome part of gaming, and that experience is even something that you may think is insignificant can pay huge dividends and have a lasting impact on the kids and the family members in your life that can last a lifetime. And I think that's pretty cool. And the fact that this hobby gives you a lot of opportunities to do that. And I'm confident that my kids have experiences of, I remember when we played that one game, and if they asked me, I'd be like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'm glad that it's an awesome memory for you. So that's what I wanted to share as what's awesome in gaming for me.
That is awesome.
So
I only have snark, and I'm not going to put it there. I'd say, well, if you logged your plays, Doug, you would know exactly what memory your children are talking about. No. Oh, that's great. So a couple things for those who are keeping score at home. Doug's parents live next door to him. That is why he's able to just walk next door and talk to his parents about that. That's cool, though, man. Thanks for sharing that. That is awesome.
How about you? You got anything awesome? Top that sucker.
No, I'm not trying to. I'm just going to enjoy that and let that sit in the segment, and I think we move it right into the spotlight.
All right. So this week, we're going to take a look at the Lost Ruins of Arnak, the Missing Expedition. This came out in 2023 by Czech Games Edition, the designer Min and Elwin, various artists on this one. This expansion needs the base game to play. It requires 1 to 2 players, and it's going to run about 120 minutes roughly. And it is a strategy solo and co-op expansion for the base game. In the expansion, you can test the strategies offered by 2 new leaders, so it has 2 new leaders in there. It has new research tracks that you can add to the base game, and there are new artifacts, items, and assistants, all the stuff that you would kind of expect in an expansion. However, it can be played as part of a solo or a 2-player cooperative campaign that consists of 6 chapters, and each of them has a different set of rules, setup, and achievements and kind of things that you're unlocking as you work your way through this story. We're not going to spoil any of the story, and I'm not really going to get into any of the real gameplay details because it mixes up quite a bit outside of the fact that the overall experience of this was a highlight for me. As opposed to the individual, I couldn't point to an individual scenario or chapter or thing that stood out to me outside of the experience as a whole, which I enjoyed.
Yeah, and if you want to play this game, if you want to play Arnak the campaign, Lost Ruins of Arnak, all you need is the base game and the Missing Expedition. There's another expansion that came out in between the two that is not necessary, but that has additional leaders, right? The Missing Expedition comes with a journalist and a mechanic. And then there's 6 different chapters or little campaigns that you play throughout the game. I played as the journalist. Doug played as the mechanic. So if you have the other expansion, I believe you can use those characters and go along the campaign. But it's not necessary. I will also say this was absolutely a highlight for me. I'm glad we finished it. We started this all the way back in August of 2023, and we finished it in September of 2024. So in August, we got 2 plays back to back. Boom, boom. Actually 3, because we played the first one like at Gen Con, and then played another one as soon as we got back, played 2 more. So we got about halfway through the game, took a long pause, and then came back to it to finish it out. And I think it's a great way to experience the Lost Ruins of Arnak. I think that my only caveat, you have to have the right player 2 with you. It is really important that if you're playing this 2-player, and I don't think I would want to necessarily do it solo. I think I would want to play it with somebody that I play games with a lot. And it is an incredibly verbal experience. If I were to play it again, I'd probably alternate the characters. I think we were both pretty tied to our characters. But maybe journalist once and then mechanic and going back and forth just to mix it up. But it was an incredible way to experience Arnak. And recently, because of that, I was going to throw this in my What's Awesome with Gaming segment, but I've been playing Lost Ruins of Arnak on BGA with folks in the Game Schooler podcast Discord. And having a great time. Just having a great time. I've been getting smoked, Doug. Just destroyed. And this is a game I'm pretty good at, but just getting rolled by folks. And the campaign's so different. It's so different to play this game cooperatively 2-player than competitively 3-player. It's so different.
Yeah. So a couple things. One, I will throw out there that although it took us almost a year to, a little more than a year to play this game, I don't want our listeners to think that that's because we didn't enjoy the game. That was more of we have other games that we got to try and get to the table, and we can fit it in on special times. And I guess the remarkable thing is not that it took us a year and a half or a year and a couple months to finish, but that we actually finished it. Normally, if it was not something that Michael and I enjoyed, we would have played a couple of games of it and tucked it on the shelf. So it is an experience that we enjoyed. So don't be thrown off by, well, geez, if you really liked it, you would have got it to the table that fast or faster.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a great point. But like you said, if we're playing 100 to 120 games in a year, and a lot of those games are repeated plays where we're playing with our family or with different game groups, it is difficult to take 2 hours, sit down and say, okay, let's do the setup, Doug, and tell me how this scenario works and then play it. I loved how the game changed from game to game.
It's cool to have a Euro or a strategy experience in the form of a cooperative game, because it avoids a lot of the classic co-op tropes and mechanisms. It's like, all right, you do your turn, and then we got to do the bad turn or whatever. The solo bot that Arnak runs is really smooth, easy to do. You flip over a tile, and he basically blocks a space, and you move on. There's not a lot of upkeep. The other caveat I'll throw out there, and maybe it's not a caveat, but just a note, is that I'm not sure we played everything right, and I don't care.
I know that we didn't play everything right, and I also don't care.
There's a lot of rules overhead in this game with the unique scenarios and the setup and keeping track of stuff. And we didn't do all that. We approached it with the idea that we were going to have fun, we were going to enjoy the game, and if you're playing with a rules lawyer, this game is probably going to slow down to a screeching halt and not be great, because there is a lot of stuff to keep track of. And like Michael said, I'm grateful I had somebody to share this experience with, and I think it does take a special partner to play the game. Because of that, you need to be on the same page. Now, if you and another rules lawyer want to dive in and make sure you're doing everything 100% accurate the whole time, that may work for you because you're both in that mindset, and time may fly. But you're probably committing about 2 hours, 2.5 hours to every game in this campaign, just with the setup and kind of learning the rules tweaks, which may come across as a negative comment. It's not. It's just, I enjoyed the experience. Just be aware of that, I guess.
Yeah, and as someone I've played it all the way through, so why am I keeping it in my collection? And I'll tell you 3 reasons. Well, one reason for sure. It is such a different experience from the base game of Lost Ruins of Arnak that if I go back and look through all 6 chapters and were to pick, okay, this was my favorite chapter, which I plan on doing. I got my BG stats right here. I've got all my notes, and I plan on doing this in the next week, so that if somebody comes over and they're like, well, tell me, this would be a great game to play with somebody who already knows Lost Ruins of Arnak. And I know we've done different school of gaming segments about potential, right?
Yeah.
But it just completely changes how you experience what is typically a very, for me, cutthroat game, a game where I don't feel like I'm doing a whole lot of good and might get 2 or 3 awesome turns in an entire game. And I love it. I love it. This is one of my favorite games. Yeah. And turns it into, okay, how are we going to approach this together? Yeah. And when the person on the other side of the table pulls off 6 or 7 combos, not only is that fantastic, but they have this little coin, this little carrier pigeon where they can send over an item. So it's like, oh, that extra arrowhead you have over there. Yeah, how long? You think maybe I could use it? Nope, I'll send it over to you right now. All right, I can send you back a compass. I don't need your compass. And so it does some things that don't happen in the base game of Arnak that I really enjoy.
Second, how many worker placement games do you have a situation where, like, are you going to be going to that space? Because I kind of need it. You know, and you have a little discussion of like, I don't need it this time, or I do. Is so bizarre to have a worker placement game like that, where normally it's like, I need it, I'm going there. Tough.
Yeah, and secondly, Doug just mentioned we played this game for 15 to 20 hours. I'll tell you one thing that we did wrong, dear listeners, and some people might just and drive off the road. We didn't keep score. It wasn't until about through the third adventure where Doug's like, I think we're supposed to be keeping score. What?
For the bot. And for ourselves.
And for ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's another reason for me to keep is I might want to go back and try this again.
Yeah.
And I forgot what the third reason is. Oh, yeah, mixing in other characters and just being an Arnak completionist. But
even on top of that, just the idea of like there's 2 more leaders and extra cards that you can now throw into the base game.
Yeah.
So even if you were never going to play the campaign again, you can throw all that stuff in and have it, for the base game to just play regular Arnak. So,
and CGE does a really good job of supporting the games in their line. Real-time numbers. This is like $24.95 at Noble Night today. They are not a sponsor. They're just a friendly local game store. And so it's usually right around, $24 to $30. So if you have Arnak and if you're looking to, really mix up your adventure, there it is.
All right. So that's our spotlight for the week, The Lost Ruins of Arnak, The Missing Expedition. Want to remind you to check out the Discord if you haven't already. You can sign up by going to gameschooler.com/Discord. Just an awesome community of listeners that are positive and excited about sharing their love of this hobby. So go check that out. Spread the word about the podcast. Let people know, somebody that you might think would like that Reiner Knizia interview. Share the podcast with them. And if you have any questions or comments, reach out to us, email at gameschooler.com. Now let's move on to the game of the week.
The game of the week. The game of the week is an in-depth look at a family-friendly game we think you should try if you get the chance. This week's game is Expeditions Around the World, designed by Wolfgang Kramer and published now by Super Meeple. Doug, give us the stats.
Yeah, Super Meeple and Hachette Games. This we are referring to the second edition of Expeditions Around the World, originally published in 1996. The art
Doug was in elementary school.
Yeah, the art. Almost out. The art is for this version is by Jan Valiani. 2 to 6 players, 30 to 45 minutes. Box says 8+. Board Game Geek says 8+. I'm going to say 10+. Where do you fit on that one, Michael?
I don't know. I put it at 8+ because I saw your 13-year-old just absolutely dominate the game.
Well, she's not 8.
And I know, but I worked it backwards, and I just thought I think I don't know. I would need to play it with my 8-year-old to give you an honest assessment. My nearly 9-year-old.
I think it's one that
10 you're safe.
Certainly 8. It's going to be one of those things where technically an 8-year-old can play this game. Will they get as much out of it as a 10-year-old and start climbing up? Probably not. This is going to be a family game, and it was a 1997 Spiel des Jahres recommended game.
Congratulations.
Yes. It is a game about moving 3 commonly held expeditions around the world in search of various archaeological sites. The board shows a map of the world with many different branching paths, and players advance the expeditions by placing plastic arrows on the board. When an expedition arrives at a location that matches one of your private site cards or one of the public site cards, you can score that card. Certain spaces on the board allow you to play again immediately, and other spaces allow you to pick up bonus tickets that you can play at any time on one of your turns. The game ends when someone has scored all of their cards. Then whoever has the highest total score wins. So there are 3 expeditions out on the board. They are represented by yellow, red, and blue arrows, and you are branching off from a center point on the board and then spreading them out across the entire world. On your turn, you have to pick a color and advance one of the expeditions. And then, if you would like to, you can use tickets. Tickets allow you to add an additional arrow to an expedition of your choice. You can remove the last arrow that was placed, or you can swap an expedition card that you have with one of the publicly available ones. The cool thing is that regardless of who puts the arrow down, if the expedition lands in Rome and you have the Rome card in your hand, you will score that as a point. So you can score on other people's turns. At the end of the game, you're going to score 1 point for each of the cards in front of you, and you're going to lose points for each expedition card still in your hand. And there's another little tricky wrinkle to this, is that before the game starts, you're going to look at your entire hand, and you start out with 12 cards in a 2 to 3 player game and 9 cards in a 4, 5, or 6 player game. You're going to look at your private site cards, and you're going to pick 4 of them, I believe. Yes.
4 in a 3-player game.
And place them out on the board in turn order. So you are giving some public information to everyone else at the table as to a location that you need to go in order to score. If at the end of the game you've collected any of those tokens, they are worth 1 point, an additional 1 point. And if there are any still on the board, you're going to lose a point for that. So it's a race to try and visit all of your archaeological sites before everybody else and potentially collect some of those public expedition cards that are available to everyone, which is one of the things I really like about this game. And that, to me, this is a game all about when to push.
Sure.
When do I push an expedition over to pick up a public site card, even though it may be going out of the way a little bit? When do I spend tickets to get an extra movement in order to, get an extra placement to pick up a city, whether that's my own or a public one? 2 other things I didn't mention is that there are 2 special spaces on the board. There are square spaces that aren't representative of a city. If you land on one of those, you can add another arrow somewhere else. There are also star cities or star areas. Those allow you to collect a ticket, and tickets are pretty tight as far as currency and being able to use and manipulate those for extra actions.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in here and say that points are also very tight.
Yeah.
In a 3-player game that we played, the winner had 16, second place had 14, and third place had 11. Right? In a 2-player game, we were tied at 19 to 19. And so points are extremely tight in terms of when you're able to get a card out of the marketplace and build almost like a free card. It really is an awesome feeling. This isn't a point salad game where where you got a special token for when you get past 50 or 100. I mean, it is a very, very tight route building tableau builder.
Yeah. The
contract fulfillment, I should say, not really a tableau builder, but
I like the accidental disruption. Of course, there's some
that surprises me, Doug, a little bit.
Well, because it's not there. You have 4. So in a 3-player game, like 4 out of your 12 cards are known to other players. All right, so there is a little bit of public information that's like, I know Michael wants to go to that part of the board. But this is a game where, I'm trying to get this over to Egypt, and Michael puts the arrow somewhere else, and now I got to either pivot or backtrack. And I really like it in this game because it's frustrating. It's unbelievably frustrating. But in most cases, it's certainly not intentional in a lot of cases, because they have no idea where you're trying to go.
Right.
And so I really like that, where it feels a little bit like a take that, even though it's nobody's doing that. I like that frustration. But I think what makes it really stand out to me is that it's amazing how quickly you can get from one side of the board to the other, or maybe this route that one of the expeditions you thought is nowhere near this area, all of a sudden somebody turns it, and before you know it, you're like, wow, that's really not that far. I thought we were going to get that location on the yellow route. Now we're going to get it on the red. And why I really like it, what's maybe surprising to you but isn't surprising to me, is that this is a game that rewards players who are able to pivot in order to provide opportunities.
Yeah.
You have to have your head on a swivel and say, ooh, if you have a one-track mind and say, I'm going to get this with the blue, you're going to waste so many turns trying to wrap it around. But if you start to see those angles of where different things open up, that's where I really like it, is pouncing on opportunity.
Well, and at the same time, the game has a little bit of a bite to it from games that were designed in an earlier time.
Yeah.
Right. There is a little bit. I can spend a ticket. Nope. I'm going to take that last arrow that you set down and I'm going to turn it over in this direction. How do you like that? And then I might think that I'm doing something. I don't want to say mean, but I might think that I'm doing something particularly diabolical or cutthroat. But then you're able to step in and say, well, actually, if I approach that route from a different direction and if I spend a ticket, then I add on another blue one, I can still get there. And so that mid to end game tension is awesome. I think it accommodates multiple types of players.
Yeah. I also like the way that the game closes in, which I think keeps the game moving quickly. And what I mean by that is this is also something that is in a things to be aware of. When you set this game up and you play it for the first time, the board is busy, it's dense, and you have a lot of cards in your hand, and it becomes it's a bit overwhelming the first time that you
I'm glad
you play
you said
this.
that.
However, the game becomes more natural and intuitive the more you play it, and the first moment at the table is overwhelming. But you go from 12 cards down to 11 cards, and it slowly gets down to where towards the end of the game, it's like, I only have six places to visit. It's easier to keep track of when things start getting really chaotic on the board. And I think it's a great thing because when you have a full mitt of hands, the expeditions are in their infancy, and it's like everything's kind of wide open. It's like, well, I just need to go in this general direction, and it's working. And so you're moving quick. And then as the game goes along, when those routes are shrinking down, so is your hand. And I think that keeps the game moving, and it avoids some of the AP or analysis paralysis that could come up from a game like this if it was more of a strategy, long-term type of thing. And it doesn't become restrictive. A lot of games that close in on themselves are restrictive. This is like, it becomes more manageable as the game goes on.
Yeah, and you pointed out something really good there. As the game goes on, you still only have 6 decisions, but you have 6 decisions because there's 3 routes, and you can build off of the route in one of 2 directions, right? So you've got is it yellow, red, and blue? You have a yellow, red, and a blue route that you're playing off of. And then if you ever create a triangle, if you ever like kind of smash the route together, then you can start that route anew. So from time to time, you might be thinking about, okay, how can I intentionally disrupt this route so that I can just, jog the yellow over in this direction. So there's, to me, after that first game, even after the halfway point of that first game, there's just enough to focus on where it makes sense. But I think that's something good to know that first teaching and learning game, because of the map of the entire world and just kind of figuring out where pieces are together. Now the graphic design of the new version is awesome. Yeah. Because every single location has a little dot. And I don't know why it took me until the second game to figure that out, other than I'm not the smartest person. I know that. But once in the second game, when you were dealing out the cards, I was looking at the map upside down. I thought, I'm at a big disadvantage. And then I just saw the dot. And I was like, oh, that's right where that location is.
Yeah.
So the graphic design is actually pretty darn good when you just get down to it. And then there's just the two little exceptions, right? You have one that gives you a ticket, and you have one that allows you to extend any of the 3 routes. And, 3, 4, 5, 6 turns, you have it down. But those first few turns, it might be a little bit bumpy. Tons of skills in this, Doug.
Yeah, well, and the cards up in the upper corner have a little map of the world with the dot on there of where the location of that card is. And just as a...
That's what I just said. I must not have been clear enough, huh?
No, I'm just saying as a helpful pointer when you're getting the game... and you're getting your hand, you can organize them kind of by continent and location in your hand to help you out a little bit, which the first game I didn't do that. And the second game I did, and was like, okay, but let's bunch these in my hand over here and these in there. And you can just kind of a pro tip for you there. What are you laughing at?
I'm looking at some of the older versions of the game on Board Game Geek because I was looking for something very specific. The National Geographic edition. Doug, I'm telling you, board games have come a long way. I know we're saying that the newest version is a little bit busy, but this thing looks like something I would have made as a third grader in an art class that I got a D- in. Okay,
MS Paint dominated the original version of this game.
Like all blue with tear. Okay, getting back on track here, folks. The skills, though, can I jump into them?
Nope, I've got one more thing I wanted to highlight before we move on.
Why don't you highlight one more thing? Then I want to talk about a few skills in here.
Yeah. So each of the cards has text on it as a little historical part of where it was discovered, where it's at, what's famous about it. The game moves too fast to read while you're playing, and you have to stay focused, and you can't read them during the game. But I do appreciate that they are on there, and I think it's a great tool for homeschoolers or teachers if they want to highlight a particular card in the game that is available to them. I know sometimes we've talked in the past that some of the games that have historical information or biographical stuff, you can kind of read it while you're waiting on your turn. This is not a game for that. You're not going to have enough time to do that, but I do appreciate it, and it is on the card. So if somebody is looking for that, extra little educational nudge of, I kind of am interested in this. Yeah. I also wanted to point out that I think this is a kind of a next step after 10 Days in the USA. So if you like 10 Days in the USA and you're looking for something a little bit more, not necessarily more strategy, but just a little bit more game length, a little bit more choices, this is a great second step. And now onto the skills. Certainly,
well, before we get into skills, I want to add in one thing here. Right. Yeah. But obviously, this hits a sweet spot for the Game Schooler podcast and Doug and I. This is about the 10th or 15th game of this type that we have reviewed. When you look at most of the games in the Underdog line that we've reviewed, whether it's Trekking Through Time, Trekking the World, First Edition, 10 Days in the U.S., now we have Expeditions around the world, there is an educational opponent and a great engaging game there. So just want to say that to some of our listeners as well. But and then remind me to talk. Well, I'll save that. I'll save that. All right. Skills. I'll go
now
ahead.
Before we get to skills,
yes. One that is in here in abundance is observation. If I can't just stare at my hand.
Yeah,
I have to be looking at what are the 3 or the 4 different places that were in the opening bids that were there. Where do I think these routes are going to go, and what are the cards in the marketplace that are available? Because there's, again, a rule from a game that's designed in an earlier era. If I have a card in my hand or on the marketplace and I build a route there, once it goes to the next person's turn, I can't go back. So I have to be looking at what is happening on my turn. Put down the phone, screenager. Don't watch the ball game on in the background. Tough. You lost that point. And so I think that's the skill that's really, really there and on the forefront for me, is that the game has a few different rewards for players who are observant.
Yeah, and I think the big one for me is that tactical thinking, which I talked a little bit before, is challenging players to make decisions based on currently available and frequently changing information. If you're playing with six players, the board is going to look very different when it gets back to your turn. And the route that you thought you had, maybe you don't have anymore, and you need to pivot and try and pick something up and kind of, as best as you can, figure out where you think other people are trying to go. And maybe I have an opportunity to pick something up on this hemisphere now that people are over there, and taking and kind of seizing the moment. Then the other one I have is the logistics, which goes hand in hand with just managing routes and where can I get this route to meet up at the hub I'm looking for it to meet up at, and being aware of where things are. Yeah,
and I have comprehension. Being able to figure out what I'm going to it's very similar to what Doug said with the tactical thinking, but part of it is in knowing when to abandon a certain goal. I think in that end game, when you get down to having 3 cards left and maybe everybody else at the table has between 3 and 5 cards left, it's, okay, I'm pretty sure I'll be able to take care of 2 of these, but one of these I'm going to have to just let go of. And it doesn't mean I have to comprehend all of the text that's on the card, but I need to be able to look out, see where it's at on the map, see where it's at in my hand. And that's part of the reason where I struggled. Okay, is this a game for an 8, 10, or 12-year-old? Because clearly I think a 12-year-old is going to be able to pivot and do that much faster than an 8-year-old. But if you're playing a game with a younger kiddo, with an 8-year-old, I think that's something that you could point out to them if they're open to it, and they could still make it happen. But that to me is the baseline skill that you know the people you're playing games with, dearest listener, and that comprehension, the level of comprehension really determines if somebody's able to engage with expeditions around the world, in my opinion.
Yeah, the last one that I've got is resource management. Normally when we talk about resource management, it's thinking about the idea of like, I have a whole bunch of goods and how am I going to spend them and where am I going to, kind of more on the surplus end of it. If I've got all these things, how do I get rid of them? This one, it's so tight in the idea of I've got one arrow to put down. Where can I put it? And not only that, it's where can I chain it? Where can I don't really need to extend the blue route here, but if I extend the blue route there, then I get another free one because I connected it to a square, and that's where I'm going to use it to go to move the yellow route, and then the yellow route connects to a ticket, and I'm going to use that ticket to then extend another one in another space.
You had an awesome turn, Doug. That was
great,
a really good turn.
But using that, and I think in the games that we played, there are times where both of you and I realize it's like, I really wish I had tickets right now.
Thank you for, yeah.
I think, and where it's just like, wow, these are really more valuable than I thought. And not to be frivolously wasted early in the game. You get halfway through and you're like, I wish I had more tickets. I could do so much if I just had another ticket. And so managing that limited resource, whether it's the arrows on your turn or the tickets that you have, are very important in this game.
So 2 things. 1, thank you for that vivid replay of your amazing turn that helped you to get the win in the last game.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like I want you to come over to my house next time I mow the lawn just so you can give a good play-by-play analysis and create a very vivid. And 2, Doug, do you believe this is a game that develops healthy competitive habits as 2 or more parties compete for a goal or reward that isn't shared?
I do believe it is. Yes.
Yes. And that's where this is a game for competition. Really nice, competitive. It's not just a pure tug of war, because there are times where I'm really happy that my opponent extended the route in that direction, but I don't want to let everyone at the table know it, because I need that route to continue going in that direction while I build over in the western part of this flat 2-dimensional planet. So I think really good competitiveness, and I probably wouldn't have put it on here had I not played this game with Doug's daughter. She's a competitive gamer, and an awesome kid to play games with, and I could see her really competing. And Doug was not giving it an inch. Doug was playing the game, and I think this is a game that, because of that, fits in a lot of different settings. And I'm not just trying to take us there if you have more skills.
Nope. That's good.
But the thing that really prevents it from me from saying, after school program, is that there's a lot of little pieces, and the little pieces are very important, because one of the end game scenarios is if you run out of a route. But if you have a library where a game can live, I think this is a fantastic library game. If you have your processes down for checking in and out materials, I might struggle if I were running that library to bring this game in because of the little routes. I'd want to make sure that I had very defined inventory system of it. But boy, there is some really good learning and a very solid game in 40 minutes ish.
Yeah, a great family game. I think if you are the type that likes Ticket to Ride, and you have that family that sits around and plays an hour game, and that's your evening entertainment, I think this game could work really well in the family setting and kind of create those long-term memories. So that is our game of the week.
I just have one other thing I want to mention on it before you wrap it up. I'm glad Hachette brought it back.
Yes.
When I first got it, I was a little bit skeptical, like, oh, a game from 1996 that I haven't heard of before. I've heard of 10 Days in the USA. I've heard of some of these other games that have been brought back. And then when we got it to the table and played it, I was like, this is an awesome game. And then doing research and seeing that, like you said at the top end of the segment, it was recommended for a spiel. It's just my takeaway thought with it is I need to judge things a little bit less by the cover. Be open, not get into snarky reviewer. And man, am I excited for other games to come back and get a fresh coat of paint and see what else is out there, because there is such a giant back catalog, 30, 35 years of games yet to be played by both of us. So
yeah, that didn't get the attention maybe the first time around, because I shouldn't say the attention, because clearly it was is spiel recommended, but more of the audience is so much bigger that it didn't get the attention of the bigger audience, right?
Well, MS Paint is real. I think when you said that comment, this is a good looking game now. It's a fun game.
Yeah. So that is our game of the week, Expeditions Around the World, the second edition from Hachette Games.
The School of Gaming. In the School of Gaming, we discuss concepts, keywords, etiquette, and helpful ideas in the world of gaming. This week, we discuss the changing selection of games in big box stores. Doug, take us into this segment.
All right. I started making notes for this one, and I feel like I've got a dissertation of the way that I started just going off. To give a little bit of a history, about 15 years ago, the landscape for game selection at big box stores was very different than it was now, than it is now. It was hard to find hobby games at a Walmart or a Target. The maximum, and I would say maximum, because when I first played Catan, you were not getting Catan. Michael sitting back. You were not getting Catan at Walmart or Target. Those were, Ticket to Ride, Catan were the first ones that kind of came in. Then places like Target began to add more hobby, quote, hobby titles. And I remember when it started to happen, because people on BGG, Board Game Geek, were like, they were highlighting it like it was news. It's like, it's happening. We're going mainstream. You're getting more availability out there. And I think...
So what time period was that first wave of happening?
I would say probably...
2011, 12?
2012, 13 would be like when it started gearing up. Because I remember when I got Catan, and you could not get that at that. So
no, you had to go to a hobby store. Settlers of Catan.
Or Barnes and Noble was starting to creep into that.
2004, 2005, 2006, Dominion, Settlers of Catan, those were hobby stores.
Yep. I would say that pre and post-pandemic, there were a lot of hobby games in big box stores. That was, for me, kind of the peak. And recently, it seems that places like Walmart and Target are kind of reverting back to simpler games, or easier, faster playing games, and kind of getting out of... They still have... I'm not saying that they're completely eliminating it. It's, you can still get Wingspan at Target and things like that. However, it does seem like there's less of that space on their shelf that's dedicated to what we would consider hobby games.
And we do have a worldwide audience, Doug. So let's just pause for a minute, and I want you to continue your dissertation. This is excellent. But let's just define what we mean by a big box game. In the United States, especially in the Midwestern store. United States, big box store, sorry.
Yeah.
Walmart, I think that's a store that most folks are going to know, and Target. And that's where a lot of the games have been. Those are really the two stores that we're locking in on, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's and a big box store would be classified as a large department store that is carrying multiple items of a whole bunch of different types. It's going to have a sporting section. It might have food. It's clothing. It's you one-stop shop. You can get everything you need for the week at
Starbucks.
one of these stores. Yeah,
or Subway.
So let me just stop there. Why do you think that the stores are probably reverting back to simpler games?
I think everything comes down to the bottom line.
Yeah.
Right. And if I can sell one Everdell for $74.99 or one Wingspan for $61.99, why would I take a chance on the latest Ravensburger Enter game here, right? At $29.99. So I don't know that is not my area, but what I will say is 2 years ago in 2022-ish, I mean, we had board games and light hobby and hobby level games that were coming into grocery stores. So there certainly was something that happened. I know I was traveling for work. I was at a Kroger's and there was a bunch of board games just staring right at me. I was like, I'm not at a Target. I'm at a grocery store,
Yeah.
Same thing with Pick and Save here in the Midwest. So that change has happened. If I walk through a grocery store, I'm not seeing those types of board games. The other thing that I am seeing in the big box is it's starting to shrink a little bit. The selection and the aisles and the SKUs. And, we had this conversation offline a few weeks back. It came up in our Discord. And then on Twitter, Jeffrey Allers, the designer of Donut Shop and New York Slice, had put out a post and really posed this question. And that's what started it, framed it for the School of Gaming segment. So I don't know. What are your thoughts, Doug?
I mean, I think ultimately it comes down to simple games are easier to get to the table, and they're easier to get an impulse purchase of, I'm going to sell a $70 game. The odds of selling one $70 game or selling five $15 to $20 games is probably easier, of people walking by and it's like, oh, I'll give that a try, or that has a cool looking cover, or whatever it may be. And I think folks in the hobby fail to realize the true capacity of non-gamers, the ability of non-gamers to pick up and learn a game. It's not as easy as people in the hobby make it out to be. And out of the broad spectrum of people that have played board games or that occasionally play board games, you and I, the people probably listening to this podcast, and the folks on Board Game Geek, whether they want to admit it or not, are the minority of game players. People are buying. There is a reason that Candyland, Monopoly, and all of the other games that Board Game Geek people like to make fun of are still being sold on the shelf and still have a place there. People have grown up with them. They continue to buy them because what you said earlier, it's a money-driven business. If they were not making money with those games, Hasbro and Mattel would stop printing those games. And I think what really bothers me, and we'll turn this in definitely positive at the end for sure, but what bothers me is when gamers take it almost as a personal slight when mass market stores don't carry heavy or hotter games, as if it's dependent on Walmart and Target that's the only way that the hobby will grow, or that the hobby needs to grow. And I think one of the important things is to compare it to any other hobby that's represented in a big box stores. And are golfers getting mad because you can't get a set of tailor-made irons in the sporting goods section at Target? No. Are wine connoisseurs miffed that there isn't a vintage section in the Walmart beer cave?
They just go to Aldi's.
So why do gamers have an inflated importance of their hobby of what should be in a big box store?
Yeah, and I can't answer that because I just know for this one gamer here, a shift has happened, or we saw something happen in that 20 late 18, 2019 into 2021, 2022 that has somewhat subsided. Raccoon Tycoon was in Walmart. There were games that were, a lot of our games of the week that were sitting on the shelves in Walmart that are no more, that have come and gone from there. And then you have some of those other lifestyle hobby games such as Wingspan, Root, and Everdell that do live in Target, but the other sides of those targets where other games lived has really shrunk. And it's some of those toy games, some of those educational games.
Well, it's not that strategy games aren't great. I mean, I love them, but they're not for everyone.
Yeah.
And one could even make the argument that if somebody pulls Wingspan off the shelf, gets it home, and it's too complex for them, and they get overwhelmed, they may not come back to the hobby, and that could have the exact opposite effect than what the folks that want to promote the hobby and want to get more people interested in it. It could have the opposite effect.
Yeah.
I mean, games are easier than ever to get, and I'm aware that everyone does not necessarily have a great local game store, but nobody's confusing Walmart with a local game store. Nobody's going to sit down and get some of the social aspects that you get from a local game store.
So you're saying it's an issue with expectations from the general hobby consumer.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's what my issue. My issue is not necessarily that that Walmarts and Targets are cutting back, because I think there's both financial and I think that those financial reasons come back to, if people aren't buying them off the shelf, they're not doing what the expectations of the hobby folks think that they're doing anyway. So why are we putting that burden on them? I think that folks who like games that take over an hour to play are in the minority of the general population. I like games that take over an hour. But in a society, we are a minority, and sometimes the people in the hobby act with superiority. And this is where I'll bring it back around to the good thing, which is from our interview last week. If Dr. Knizia taught us anything, is that the purpose of the hobby is to bring people together and elicit joy, right? And if that's the goal, it doesn't matter what game is sitting on the table. So my problem is not with Target and Walmart changing what's in their aisle. My problem is with folks that are in the hobby that are getting upset that they can't evangelize their hotness or their strategy game, and are not appreciating the fact that I don't care if they pick up a game of Candyland, which I think is hot garbage. If they're playing it with their family and having a good time, that's all that matters. That's the important part. And the looking down upon, well, I can't believe you would buy that silly dexterity game, or this game with no choices, or this is clearly a cash grab. Hey, if you want to play Marvel Spider-Man Sorry with your family, and it gets you together at the table and having a good time, and it's bringing people together and eliciting joy, who are we to mock the game that does that? And I think that's the most important part.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think, when you asked the question at the top end of the segment, I had a very strong response, but I didn't want to just take the segment there. I think but I do want to add it in somewhere, and I think it's now instead of waiting till next week to follow up. Not to pivot too hard, but I think you have an Amazon effect, and I think you have online game stores that really present themselves almost as being a friendly local game store. And two examples of that: one is Game Nerds, one is Noble Knight, where those stores are able to undercut Walmart. I mean, Amazon alone is able to oftentimes, and I think that those big box stores see that, and that's what I was referring to with the bottom line. I think there's other retailers that have essentially moved into that market and grabbed some of those titles. And I'm speculating. I'm not a retailer. I don't know any of that. That's just my thoughts on it. So
well, and I think it's a situation where it was a growing market, and I think a lot of big box stores recognize that hobby gaming was a growing market, went into it, and then maybe figured out that market's not as big as we in the hobby would like to think that it is for the mass scale. And maybe they weren't moving the amount of hobby games that they thought they would, whether that's from a result of Amazon or Barnes & Noble. I mean, anytime I go into Barnes & Noble, their whole section looks like a friendly local game store.
Yeah.
That department for them has exploded, where they got, CDs, DVDs, and movies are shrinking, and their tabletop section seems to be expanding.
And it blurs right into the toys, right? You got the kid toy section that blurs right into it. Yeah. And so you're right. You have specialty stores that have also, jumped into that. A bookstore now is almost as good as a friendly local game store in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I'm just curious what makes gamers think that their most special elite stuff should be on the shelf.
So where are you getting that? Where are you picking up on that?
Just the idea of that they should have better games. That idea that big box stores, that Walmart should be carrying better games. That this is not the representation of the best in our hobby, and it goes back to the golf thing. It's like they don't have all of the best brands in the golf section of the sporting goods set. Like, they can only do so much when you have a section of the store and you're catering to sporting goods, men's clothing, women's clothing, food, books, baby and kids, electronics, seasonal stuff that's coming and going, like lampshades and bed sheets, all in one store. Why are we expecting that they would have the whole inventory of the best stuff?
Why are we expecting a general retailer to carry specialist items?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's my summary would be that we had a moment in time. We had a moment where multiple general retailers were carrying specialty items, and that moment is past us.
Yes. So I don't know that, I'd be curious to see what other people's thoughts are, or if there's something that we missed the boat on, if I'm going too hard. But I think it goes back to that core thing for you and I, where why are we beating up stuff that's getting to the table? It doesn't matter what's getting to the table. Enjoy it. The fact that there are games in a store, regardless of the quality, is the important part.
Now, that's me shaking some dice, man.
Michael's ready for some dice. Let's move on to the high five. If you're anything like us, you're constantly on the hunt for new games to try out. This week, Michael and I are going to be talking about the coolest dice in board games. Michael, how'd you approach this list?
Such a hard list. So first off, no D6s. That was for me. The dice needed to have something on them. It couldn't just be. And I'll get into it more, because maybe you included some very.
You're talking no dice with pips. Is that what you mean by D6s, or literally D6?
No plain dice with just 6 pips. 6-sided dice with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They all need to have something special on them.
Gotcha. All right.
Because I had to draw the line somewhere, Doug. We have so many wonderful dice games. I mean, the game I've been playing nonstop for the last 10 days, Andromeda's Edge, has these wonderful little D6 dice. But you know what? They didn't make the cut because they're D6 dice. You know, I talked about Las Vegas, or if not to you, on our Discord, because just wonderful little dice. When I see them, I I love this game, but they're not special. So cool dice. How about you?
I wanted to, my initial one was like quality and feel. Like the ones that just like, oh, wow, these feel special. Definitely ones that avoided, a good example for me was like a game like Quantum. That game has D6s. You don't really roll them that much, but they're like big and frosty, and they're kind of cool dice. But those didn't make the list. The other thing that I had was I have a handful of games on my list that I felt like the way that they used the dice was really cool and interesting, as opposed to just the physicality of the dice.
Yeah. Same. Awesome.
So I've got some bizarre ones in there, so we'll see.
let's jump in. We might have crossover on the first one. This was the Gen Con 2023 darling in my own house, and that is chicken. And chicken has these orangish and yellowish and whitish dye, like cream color dye, that have eggs and chickens on them, but there's also foxes. And we've talked about chicken in other episodes. I don't want to do a full review of all 5 of the games on my list because I enjoy all of them. But the dice in chicken are very cool. And it's an incredibly simple game. Some would argue an activity where you're racing around a little track to try to get to 25, and you got to know when to hold them, know when to hatch them, and know when to just walk away before those foxes gobble you up. So I like the dice in chicken. That's number 5 for me.
All right, good choice there. That was on my honorable mentions. My number 5 may be laughable to some. It is ranked 23,000 on Board Game Geek. It has a stellar rating of a 5.6. But it's a combination of something that I think they do. It's just a neat concept. And I've got 2 games that kind of run in together by the same publisher. And that is Go Low and Go Long. And Go Low is a dice game about golf. And you're rolling various 12-sided, 9 and 12-sided. No, they're all 12-sided dice. And the 5 ones represent par 4s. The red dice represent par 3s. And 2 blue dice are par 5s. And you're rolling these dice and trying to create a golf score. And the similar approach for football for Go Long. And, you know, there's a penalty die, there's a pass dice, and they have different yardages on them. And it's just a really interesting, simple way to use dice. They're big, they're chunky, you're rolling them. They're not D6s, so they're rolling better. And just it's a cool dice in a board game or in a dice game. Originally published in 1999, designer Patrick Shea and Zamondo Entertainment. So not a publisher we talk about, and we may never talk about them again. But it was one that I saw, and I'm like, you know, that is cool dice in there. So that's my number 5, Go Low.
Great entry. And what I love about that, too, is how you keep score. It almost feels like you're golfing.
Yes.
Right? They've got that little sheet of paper and the pencil like, Doug, what did you get, a 7 or an 8 on that one? Okay.
Birdie. Nailed it.
Yeah. Bad moments in podcasting, folks. I didn't shout out the designer, the publisher, or anything, and I just showed it off and showed the dice. I was so excited. I was shaking like all 25 of them. So my number 5 was Chicken 2023, Scott Alms and Keymaster Games. So thank you all for that one. Number 4 for me is from the good Dr. Reiner Knizia, and that's Siege of Rundar 2021. Ludo Nova is the publisher. Now, it's a cooperative deck builder, so how can you have dice? Because the dice will tell you what you rolled for your attack. You have these range characters, and then also, he doesn't call them melee, but I'm going to call them melee and melee characters. And it just, you know, you need to be able to get your little bow and arrow or your kablow. But just 5 little dice that are very lightweight. The issue that I have with them, they're kind of rounded, so they roll. And even in a solo game, it's like, yes, I'm going to hit that for 3. And then at the last moment, it will roll and I hit it for 1. So it's the rounded effect where I think something awesome is going to happen. And then the dice tray just kind of nudges them to what I didn't actually want. Cool little game. I've actually only played this one solo. It's one that eventually I'll play with other humans. I've had it on a trade list 1 or 2 times, but I just can't seem to get rid of it because the game combines a lot of different things with the cooperative deck building and kind of a little bit of a dungeon crawler-esque and Kung Fu Panda type art with Andrew Bosley, who did the art on it. So that's my number 4 is The Siege of Rundar from Dr. Reiner Knizia.
All right. Maybe we'll play that someday, Michael.
Yeah, maybe. I'm
waiting for it. My number 4 is Dice Town, published in 2009 by Bruno Catala, Ludovic Mablanc, and published by Madigo. And Dice Town, I think what they do really cool on this is somehow they've been able to convey a deck of cards or certainly card faces onto sides of a dice, and you are essentially playing poker by rolling dice. And there is a 9, a 10, jack, king, queen, ace on the cards or on the dice, and you're rolling them, trying to build a poker hand, and just not something that I think you think of seeing, of like, well, if I'm doing a poker mechanism, I'm going to use poker cards. And the way that this one does it just works out really well, of the way that you're kind of gambling, and you can pay money to force other people to stop rolling, and or you can pay money to roll again. You have to roll the dice and then keep one every turn. But maybe you want to keep two, so you pay $1 to keep an extra one, or you want to re-roll and not take one, so you pay $1, and eventually you get payouts based on how good your hand is or what you've collected the most of. And so I think it's an innovative way that they use dice to fill in for cards. And so that's my number 4, Dice Town.
Awesome. I know you love that one, and the dice are really cool on that, aren't they? How they have the little like ace, and that's cool.
Yeah, and it's the way that they put the king, queen, and jack that really have that feel of looking at a card face. The 9 and the 10 is 9, in diamonds on the dice. It's really well done.
Yeah, and I'm going to go with well done, and I haven't actually played this version of this game yet, because this version came from 2023. It's designed by Stefan Feld. The publisher, though, is Awaken Realms, and that's Castles of Burgundy Special Edition. And when I unboxed this, I thought, I was really cynical, like, what are they going to do with the dice? And so I backed this thing. I think it was on GameFound when it came out, and I got it, and it's a gigantic box, and I've got some nice tokens and things to go with it. And I can remember, and I had a very similar feeling today as I was looking for it, because it was like, I know this is going to be on the list. I just don't know where if it fits, if it's an honorable mention, or if it's going to slide up. But in a game that a lot of things have been, I don't want to say accused of, but there's a lot of reviewers who, it's overproduced, it's this, it's that. I get it. But for me, there's the dice just look really elegant, and they fit the game so well. So I guess this would be the one where, yes, they are standard, D6 pips, but when I look at it, how the colors fit, and it just, I think they did a really nice job with these, because you only get 2 of them, right? And when you're playing Castles of Burgundy, each player gets their 2. So I feel like they did a really nice job with that. And I'm not saying go out and spend however many hundreds of dollars. I'm not telling you to do that. But I thought that was a cool little thing that they added with the nice little castles and everything else that's in that one. So that's my number 3, is Castles of Burgundy Special Edition.
All right. My number 3 is the one that I really wanted to highlight as a really unique. It's almost the aura around this die that to me is really special and cool. And, we've talked about a bunch of different dice chucking games and things like that. And of course, when you're rolling dice and there's luck and things like that involved. But this die has the potential to be a game changer, and I love the thematic tie-in. And
what
that
is it?
Is the exposure die from Dead of Winter: A Crossroads game. And in order to explain why this is so cool, I have to explain a little bit about how the game works, which is if you are in a space with a zombie, you have to roll the exposure die. And it is a 12-sided die. And I don't know what the exact breakdowns is, but there are blanks, and there are little wounds. If you roll a wound, then you're gonna take a wound, or you can get frostbite, which is one of the things, which is a wound, but it's a wound that you are basically getting more wounds as it goes on. However, there is one side of the die that has a tooth on it. You are bitten, and the survivor is killed, and the bite effect spreads. Like, you roll a 12-sided die because you were exposed to a zombie, and one of your characters may die. And I love the permanence of that. I love that it doesn't destroy your entire game. It's not like you roll this die and it's like, well, my game is ruined. I just lost a character. Like, it's not as big of a deal as it seems, but it does have a bit of gravity to it that adds to the immersion of this game. That I just think is really cool. If you told me, oh, you're going to put a game on your list that the die could potentially kill you, I would probably say no way.
That doesn't seem like a very Doug type game.
But the way that it integrates and what it's representing, there is part of me that really loves that. It's like, oh my gosh, my character just got absorbed by a zombie. He's dead. He's gone. And it's like, that is cool. And it's just changes the way you play. Is that worth the risk? The amount of risk that's like, I'm going to be next to that zombie and I'm going to have to roll that die. That decision point is one of the things I really love about the game. And the only dice that I'm highlighting a single die in a game, there are other random or regular D6 in Dead of Winter. But this die, the power that it has, is what puts it on my list at number 3. Dead of Winter, a Crossroads game.
That is awesome. And Doug, I realize I made a mistake. I brought 6 to the party. I have 2 number 3s on here. I got so excited with this one. Chicken was supposed to be an honorable mention, but maybe I have 2 number 1s. We'll figure it out at the end. I'm going to talk about 6 games today. I've done this before. Number 3 for me,
again, Michael.
No kidding. Number 3 for me was a game of the week all the way back in episode 40, and that's My Little Scythe. My Little Scythe has these dice that the whole game is just filled with a toy factor feel of it, and I think a big reason of that is, I can't say a big reason, but you've got these just cool little plastic miniatures that look like toys that you're moving around the board, and the dice are great. You roll them for resources. You've got your apples and your gems, and it's just it adds a cool little flavor to the game. So that's my number 3 is My Little Scythe, and all the way back in episode 40. I'm not suggesting you go back and listen to us that long ago. We were just starting to hit our stride. We were a different show then, slightly younger.
We're all different people.
Yeah, we are. But that is a game that, again, I have not gotten to the table in a long time, and I don't care. I love that game, and it's a big reason of it is because of how all the different components fit together, and the dice are a part of that. So, My Little Scythe.
Interesting. I bet if you would have asked me before this segment started if My Little Scythe had dice in it, I would have said no. So, interesting. I need to do a better job remembering games. My number 2 is Dice Forge, which is a game all about building your own dice. It came out in 2017. The designer is Regis Bonasse from Libellude. And it's essentially kind of a deck builder but you're adding and buying new sides to your dice. And whether you want those sides to give you more resources or victory points, that choice is up to you as you slowly build them up. You have 2 dice throughout the game, and you're changing the sides, and maybe you've got one that gives you 1 gold, and now you add on a space that gives you 2 gold, and there are a couple of different currencies that you're playing, but they do this. There are other games that have added customizable dice to them.
Yeah.
But they always seem, in my opinion, they feel chintzy. These ones are chunky, and the artwork on them is amazing, and they kind of feel like good dice, and that's why they're on my list. Is the uniqueness of building your own, but the fact that they got the quality of them so well done is why it's my number 2, Dice Forge.
And why do you think other games have not gotten that down? Like Dice Forge has.
I have no idea.
I agree with you. We've tried a handful of them where it's like, oh, this doesn't work. I'm popping stuff in and out of there. Things are rolling off the table.
It seems like it would be something that more designers would integrate into their game as an interesting thing. I don't know.
Yeah, well, we might have some crossover here because my number 2 or could be number 1A, depending on how you want to count it at home, but that's Dice Throne. I love the dice and Dice Throne. I brought the Santa and Krampus. I actually brought Santa's dice with me today for this segment. Have some of the metal and some of the regular. All that to say, what I absolutely love about the dice and Dice Throne is sometimes I want a number, but oftentimes I want the object. And so maybe, I need an axe. I really, really need an axe. And then I'm upset that I roll a 5 or a 6, where typically in a lot of games, because I don't want that bell or I don't want that special twinkly star, right? I really wanted an axe so that I could get that extra damage and put the damage on the character. I also love how the dice work with the cards and can be manipulated with the cards in Dice Throne. All the different characters and all the different things that they've done with that. So that's my first number 1.
Yeah, that's my number 1 as well. And it's, I could have easily put a game like Quarriors on this list, which I think is kind of a predecessor for what the dice and Dice Throne became. But the idea of the dice with the unique colors for the character, the unique symbols, and the numbers. And sometimes looking for those numbers, and sometimes you're looking for the symbols. And I like jumping back and forth in between them. And I love, we have played a bunch of Dice Throne, but there is something to be said about the idea of, like, these are my character's dice. I'm not just grabbing a whole bunch of, all right, you get 3 black D6s, and I get 3, and you get 2 red ones, and that's my dice pool. It's, no, these are my dice. These are the dice that belong to this character, is what makes it feel unique and special to me. That's why they are cool. I don't get any more dice throughout the game. I don't add on. These are the ones that belong to my character. Those are Santa's dice. Krampus can't play with Santa's dice. Those are his.
No, you can't mix those dice together.
And what they've done with the colors and the icons, whether that's through the basic Dice Throne or as they've added Marvel and X-Men and all of that combined, it's almost the whole system. Dice Throne originally came out in 2018. Gavin Brown, Manny Tremblay, and Nate Chatelier.
Roxley Games,
from
baby.
Roxley Games. So my number 1 as well, Dice Throne.
Awesome. I have one other number 1 just to mention here. I've been playing it a ton lately solo.
Too many. And you got too many, Michael.
Too many. Yes, too many. It's too many bones. And that is the dice in this game. Not only are they fantastic, the ones that I'm showing on the screen right now, if you're listening, that's great. I won't do this often, but we'd like to get a few more subscribers. So just click on and subscribe to us on YouTube. But there are going to be some of your basic attack dice. And then there's other die that you can, most oftentimes the baddies are going to put on you. But, oh man, I've got poison on me. How am I going to actually remove this dice? And I love that physical, tactile nature of placing the dice onto the chips or getting the dice placed onto my character. And then each character, or as they're called in the game, gear locks, also have their own set of dice. And so I think the thing that I love about it, and it's very similar to Dice Throne, but I love that learning aspect. I think anytime you get like a new little set of dice, whether it's in Dice Throne or whether it's in Too Many Bones, it's like, okay, what do these do? And how am I going to get to use them in the game? Yeah. And in one game, it might take 3 minutes. In another game, it's 30 minutes. But I love that sense of wonder and learning and how is this going to evolve in the game. And then there's the chance, right? Because you're throwing them and going. So,
yeah. Well, that knocks chicken off the list.
Yeah, that did knock chicken off the list. Too Many Bones is designed by Josh J. Carlson and Adam Carlson, and it's Chip Theory Games, 2017.
All right. Well, let us know in the Discord or email us what your favorite, what you think are the coolest dice in the board games that you have. Which ones do you enjoy playing with? I got a bunch of honorable mentions, probably too many to say. Any that you want to highlight or throw out there, Michael, or just keep it moving?
Go ahead.
I just have Pioneer Days, Pandemic the Cure, Bang the Dice Game, Memoir 44. All were in contention. Let's put it that way.
I have one more we've been playing very recently in our house, and that's Sausage Sizzle by Marcus and Inca Brand, and 25th Century Games has the most recent release of that. So
good one there. All right, well, subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. And if you haven't, what's wrong with you? Subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you haven't, what's wrong with you? Follow us on Game Schooler, at Game Schooler on X. And if you haven't, what's wrong with you? Join our Discord.
Easy. They're here. They're the one listening. They're an hour and a half in. We appreciate it.
Yeah, but I'm going to do that thing that when you're watching YouTube videos and they say, did you know analytically?
Click like and subscribe.
Analytically, only 25% of the people that view this content are subscribers. I'm just using that philosophy. Okay. So, and join our Discord, gameschooler.com/Discord. Next week, we're going to be talking about Spotlight, and we're going to hammer out the rest of the stuff later on. But we do know that we'll be talking about Spotlight as our game of the week. So thank you so much for spending the last hour or so with us. We truly appreciate it.
Now get out there and keep gaming.